Recording in progress.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Donna Chow, and I am your host and moderator again for today's eLotus webinar. Here at eLotus, we have been hosting educational courses for over 2 decades, and we are proud to be your trusted source for premium CEU content with over 200 speakers, 700 courses, and 3,000 hours of continuing education. Today's webinar is ABCs of Running a Practice Part 2, presented by Michael Bizey, who will be teaching you how to develop the ability to manage your most valuable asset, your attitude, acquire tools for hiring and managing personnel effectively, recognize the benefits of systems when it comes to scaling your offerings, develop a fundamental grasp of how to create a purpose-driven organization, and gain confidence in your ability to move forward with the creation of the practice you desire. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few items to familiarize you with our webinars and how they work. Today's webinar will be from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Pacific time. We're going to have 4 breaks, and Michael will let you know when those are. And our lunch break will be 1 to 2 p.m. So since today is a practice management course, just letting you guys know, the Florida board, it is not approved for the Florida board. So if you are a Florida acupuncturist, acupuncture physician, you will not receive credit for this class, but I still encourage you to stay and learn because there was a lot of great information in part 1. So you're going to learn a lot of great info for today. There's a lot of tips and clinical pearls. And for our California acupuncturists, I mentioned this during part 1's class, but I'll mention again in case someone just happens to only come to part 2 of the class. California only allows 5 credits maximum for practice management courses because it falls under category 2. So if you attended yesterday's class, then you've already used up those 5 credits. And if today is your first practice management class, you didn't attend the part 1, then you would receive a maximum of 5 credits for continuing education credits. If you didn't know this, and that's okay because there's a lot of things to know, and that's what we're here for. We've got your back. So if you didn't know this and you would like to get 8 credits for another class, please let me know right away. Let me know right now, and at this moment, you guys have an hour buffer. Let me know, info@elotus.org, and let me know that you want to exchange the class for something else. I do highly recommend that you stay for the class because, again, there's a lot of clinical pearls, but I understand, we understand if you need your credits and all that. So it's up to you. Send me an email, info@elotus.org. My name is Donna, and I'll be happy to help you. All right, so back to the class. Where did I leave off? The lecture notes. So if you want to get a copy of your lecture notes for today's class, you can download them from your Blue Course Access page and the chat room. We want everyone to be part of the conversation. So be sure to check that your chat room is set to everyone. That way everyone can see what you're typing and be part of the conversation. And there's nothing is lost. Everything is included and everyone can see what everyone else is typing. And finally, the quiz for CEUs and the video replay. I'll send you guys an email when both of them are ready. Usually, once I get the attendance once the class is over, it usually populates by the next day. And I like to hurry up and get that ready for you guys because I know a lot of people are eager to take their quiz and get their certificates. Okay, guys, let's go ahead and welcome our speaker, Michael Bizey. Michael is a healthcare entrepreneur with nearly 4 decades of experience and skill in acupuncture, traditional Chinese medicine, functional medicine, clinical exercise physiology, and nutrition. He owns and operates East Wind Healthcare, which is a 23-year-old acupuncture and wellness clinic with 3 locations in Wisconsin. All right, now let's go ahead and begin today's class. And Michael, will you please go ahead and take over now and share your PowerPoint?
Share my PowerPoint is the challenging part. I keep forgetting that, don't I? Sorry. All right, here we go. There we are. All right, great. And I want to open my, come on, where are you? I want to open my chat back up so I can see what people are saying, because I want to start off by saying, welcome everybody. I thoroughly enjoyed yesterday. I hope you did also. 8 hours can be a little long, and being the speaker and talking for all of that time, my voice did take a little bit of a beating, but I have to tell you, it was really invigorating and energizing. And it was not draining. And, and I guess that's when you're in your unique ability, that's one of the descriptions of it. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. So if hopefully you did too. And I want to start with a question. What did you like best? What's your best takeaways from yesterday? If you want to type them in the chat box, go ahead. And while you're typing, I just want to make something clear. I'm making a real sacrifice by being here today. My Green Bay Packers are playing at 3:25 local time, which that'll be right in 25 minutes into our lunch hour. So if I don't come back after lunch, well, no, I'll be back. Yes, go Packers. All right. So what did you like about yesterday? Come on. Positive focus. One of the things that strategic coach always teaches is you start every meeting with a positive focus. Positive focus is something good. What'd you like? What was your key takeaway? Ideal patients versus worst patient, great. Made me think a lot about my target market. Yeah, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that today, I do believe too. One of the books I told you about, the $100 million offer, the Alex Hormozzi, this one. Reagan gave that to me, and it's interesting because when I looked online this morning, it's available in Audible now too, and so I got it in Audible, and I did a workout this morning, and I was listening to it, and on the workout he says, if you like this book, please give it to somebody else. I thought, oh, Reagan, good. I was nervous about pricing and billing for insurance. I feel much better. The billing for insurance is one thing. This book is really about $100 million offer or a grand slam offer. And that really is the idea that we were talking about yesterday of selling a process of getting from point A to point B, which differentiates yourself and gives you a passage out of being in this competing on price kind of stuff and the commoditization of acupuncture. And we can talk more about that. Not the only acupuncturist battling the VA. Yeah, that's true. Don't get demoralized by your battles with the VA. Just figure out. I find that if you stay with it, you'll figure stuff out. I encounter people that the sky is falling when they have their battles with the VA. And part of that probably is a lack of resources and a lack of time. Encouraged by the possibility of actually being able to make a living in this business. Yeah. That is interesting because I have to tell you, I told you yesterday, I like being, I think I told you I like being the dumbest person in the room. And if I'm not near the bottom of the room, I think I'm in the wrong room, or at least I'm looking that there are people in this room that I consider to be way smarter and way better at whatever I'm trying to learn than what I am. And a couple of years ago, and sorry if you guys get tired of hearing about Go Welles and Reagan, but it's been such a strong influence on me. Reagan had a meeting in Salt Lake City, and he is always gracious and would have people over to his house. And there was a young lady who just finished acupuncture school and was starting, and so everybody had gone over to Reagan's house, and he serves wine and alcoholic beverages and hors d'oeuvres and all this kind of stuff. And I'm looking around the room, and the power in that room was just unbelievable. I was talking to somebody that it had introduced some concepts at the presentation, and who did a presentation in the afternoon, and come to find out that this guy was one of the founders of a supplement company called Natural Stacks, and that he had, when he was younger, hit a home run in some entrepreneurial business, and he parlayed the money that he had made with that into Natural Stacks and taking care of his family. And he had a young family. And I had an oh wow, when I'm talking to this guy, it's like, really? And I listened to his podcasts and things like that, and I'm like, oh yeah, you're him. Well, isn't that interesting? But looking around the room and then talking with the new acupuncturist and watching her talk to the different people that she was talking to, and I'm like, you know, do you realize there are probably at least 6 or 8 people in this room that have $1 million practices, and you're having a beer with them and talking to them, and they're happy to answer whatever questions you have. And I did say something about that to her, and she goes, yeah, I know. And so it was awesome. So I always want to be in a room where there are a lot of people that know way more than I do. Um, so let's see what else. So I guess my point is that not only can you make a living, you can make an outstanding living doing this if you want to, but it really all depends. If you are really in this model of doing acupuncture like everybody else has done it, open a clinic with a room or two, and be the rugged individualist that runs everything and does everything from answer the phone to clean the bathroom, and put all the needles in, and then wonder why you're tired. Once you get to the point of seeing bigger picture, and I'm showing you that book and saying, there's much bigger ways to create more value for people than just being someone that's sticking in needles. And that's what you really need to figure out. And hopefully going through this day will expand your perspective on that a bit, and will give you some ideas, because the ideas that are going to work for you are the ones that are yours, but they're probably going to get sparked from something somebody else says or does. All right, so without further ado, we'll jump in here. Doesn't look like any more questions. That's good. I'm going to close the chat box again for now, because that is kind of distracting when you're kind of a novice at doing Zooms. So, all right, let's see. We'll move here. That's me. And of course, yeah, I look pretty much like that, but I have glasses now. I went just before COVID, I had to go in for a driver's test, and I quick ran to the eye doctor, and it had been 20 years. And he said, why are you here? And I said, well, I gotta get my eyes tested. Okay. And I said, yeah, I suspect I'm not going to pass my driver's test if I don't have glasses. And he tested me out and looked at me and said, you wouldn't, you need glasses. And so, and they had told me I should just use readers until it didn't work. And so I said, now I'm here because it's not working. And they said, when did we say that? And I said, 20 years ago. So next, here's my my sign out front of my acupuncture clinic. My Chinese wife and Chinese son made this sign, and they squeezed a little too much information in there. When my wife looked at Primerica, she said, well, their sign is really simple. Maybe that's the way you're supposed to do signs in America. And I'm like, yeah, when you try to squeeze everything on there, and her business is this one here, the Yuan's Permanent Beauty, and she tried to squeeze in there, and she split it with Rooted Yoga, who was renting the space from us too. So yeah, that's what our sign looks like. We're on a fairly busy street here in the north side of Appleton. I do have a satellite clinic in Oshkosh and a satellite clinic in Fond du Lac. And as I explained yesterday, We use the same team to run all of those clinics. I do have one person that supports strictly in Oshkosh and Fond du Lac. She lives in Fond du Lac, but everybody else works at the mothership in Appleton, and the acupuncturist and I run to Oshkosh and Fond du Lac and get sort of like tech support. We're in text communication and such with the people in Appleton who are still answering the phone and that type of thing. Let's see if that, nope, that doesn't work yet. All right. So again, my purpose is to help people become the best version of themselves. I went over that yesterday, but just in case we got anybody new who didn't hear this, this is true of all aspects of my life. As a matter of fact, I had a kind of a different version of this way back when I was working through a temporary staffing service and putting myself through acupuncture school. We had a bunch of new people, so the owner decided to have everybody get together and kind of explain who they are and what they did, and everybody was giving their job description, you know. And when it came around to me, I was last, and I told them, yeah, my name is Mike Buzzy, and what do I do? I find people who are kind of diamonds in the rough and help them become better, well, versions of themselves. I'm not sure that's what I said then, but that was an earlier version of this purpose. So even when I was training people how to use Microsoft Word, it was still with this, I want to help people be the best version of themselves. And whether that's putting acupuncture needles in to help with a medical condition, make their pain go away, whatever it is, or doing a webinar and talking to you guys. I'd like you guys to become better versions of yourself, and to be partly responsible for helping you along your path. My hope is that something in this presentation helps you become a better version of yourself. Focus on both how to and why. Probably a lot of why. How to gives you the methodology, and why allows you to understand it so you can do it your way. And I will reiterate this. I've found in all of the work that I've done with all of the consultants that I've done, scripts are popular, or common at least, and they want you to script your employees because it's hard to get them to say the right things. And if they don't know what they're saying, scripts are always the start. But human beings are resistant to scripts. At least most human beings are resistant to scripts. And so for me, if I understand why, I will probably come up with a how that works. And so that's my philosophy with presenting this the way that I do it. Why me? As we all are, I'm unique. First time I got paid for acupuncture was 1998. You know that Tina asked me to speak, and we talked about this a lot yesterday. Again, I give a lot of credit to Tina, and you know, it's not polite to ask someone their age, and I do believe she's a bit younger than I am, but I find that if you take the time, there are many younger people that have a lot to teach you, and I'm forever grateful to Tina and the conversations I've had with her. She's had probably as strong of influence on the clinical side of my career as probably almost anybody. So thank you, Tina. And if you don't know who Tina is, it's Tina Chen. She is one of the owners of eLotus. So you should know that, and Evergreen Herbs. So I just assume that people know that, and every once in a while it might be, yeah, they don't. But she's awesome. So if you dial into the helpline for Evergreen Herbs, you're going to get either her or John, her brother. So they are both very smart, and then they've done all those books, and you know, John's got more initials behind his name, but you know, Tina's not dumb. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I've invested a lot of money, and I'm still here, and I'm willing to share with you, you know, what I've learned and what I've gathered through my travels of some 40 years, 25 of it in acupuncture and 15 of it in the healthcare industry and cardiac rehabilitation as an exercise physiologist primarily, and middle management. So 75,000 patient, 1.3 needles, $6 million collected, 1.5 million going to people that I employed, which I'm happy to do. And then almost $250,000 paid to consultants, which I encourage you to do. And I know that some of you have student loans that feel overwhelming, but you need to not only make a living and put food on your table, but you need to invest in yourself. You are the best investment. And that's going to be the theme of the first part of today. Oh yeah, you'll never be successful as an acupuncturist. And I think that most people have had somebody who tries to steal their dream and take that away from you. That was an ex-wife and my wonderful aunt who let me, I love my Aunt Molly. She let me live in her basement after my family moved out of my little hometown. And that was 4 years of undergraduate. So thank you, Molly. And I told her once that she lives about an hour away from me and she's taken some falls. She's 89 years old now, I think. And she's had she's fractured bones in her vertebrae and in her lower spine. And I told her I would be happy to do acupuncture on her and I would never charge her because she let me live with her. But she'd have to drive to Appleton. I wasn't going to go there. And she said, thank you very much. I appreciate that. But yeah, I'm not getting in the car and driving that far either. So hopefully she does well with somebody over there. So if you have, I hope he talks about, type it in the chat box and I'll circle back and look at it on the first break. So something comes up during this time. And I forgot today to review my slides and to write down what I was going to be talking about. But in the beginning, we're going to be talking about your most important asset, and that is your attitude. And this is really interesting. I hadn't thought about this. It was Strategic Coach that really, and Strategic Coach is, Dan Sullivan, and you can look that up. And I will tell you about Strategic Coach, and because I keep mentioning it. So again, for those people that were not here yesterday, if you Google any of that, he has got a boatload of content that is absolutely free to you. So do that. He does, for his groups, there is, I think, a $200,000 a year income generated by your business to qualify to be part of that, part of his signature group. But he's in LA, he's in Santa Barbara, he's in Chicago, he's in Toronto, he's in London. And it's fantastic stuff. But anyway, he taught me that your attitude is your most important asset, because any problems with your attitude are going to derail everything, because you are the energy behind your practice. You're the energy behind your business. And even if it's just you, when you go in with a bad attitude, your patients will pick it up. If you're the one doing, doing the care, your team will pick it up if you're the one leading the team. And if you get down, your ambition will drop, your energy will drop, and you will not move forward as fast as you otherwise would. So having said all that, it's like, so you just force your attitude to be good. It's, well, sometimes you got to just suck it up and do that. But more importantly, you have to protect it. You have to keep negativity away from you, because you can't afford to let that negativity sink in and cause you to, lose your energy, lose your focus, your confidence. When negativity happens, you tend to lose your confidence. And again, your business is dependent on you having a positive attitude and remaining confident. The next concept is certainty and uncertainty. We all have uncertainty. We need to focus on the certainty, and then we need to kind of take steps to alleviate the negative impact of uncertainty. Self-awareness is huge, huge, huge. I don't know why, maybe I was forced at a young age to be self-aware, but I have been, I guess, blessed to have the self-awareness that maybe it was when I was young that I considered things to be my fault more than I considered them to be other people's fault. And so instead of looking for someone else to blame, I ended up searching inward and finding out what it was that I was doing. And you can get to a negative place when you're doing that, but when you reach a certain level of maturity, you kind of understand that your self-awareness can be a tool for you to realize what your strengths and weaknesses are and play to your strengths and improve your weaknesses. And the other thing is thinking about your thinking. As strategic coach, Dan will end things with thinking about your thinking. So what do you think about this? What is your thinking? And there's a app that is a strategic coach app, but I think it's available for anybody. It's called Winstreak, WINSTEA streak, REAK, Winstreak, right? And so all of this is Dan has a rule that at the end of every day, I have to identify 3 wins. And then I have to identify 3 anticipated wins for tomorrow. So before you lay your head on your pillow at night, you go into your app and you type in the 3 wins. And I will tell you, I've been doing this for probably a year or so. I'm good, and then I miss for a week or something, and then I'm good again and miss for a day and whatever. But when you do this, in the beginning, it seems mechanical and that you're making stuff up and it's kind of fake and that's not really a win. But when you think about your thinking, it's like you're judging yourself, and that's not good. Okay. And then I kind of had this breakthrough, and then it seemed that what I was putting in there on a nightly basis were real wins. And it was kind of flowing, and it's like, so are things like improving and I'm getting real wins now, or what's going on? But I think it is kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And the idea is, if you focus on the positive, you're checking your attitude, you're maintaining your confidence, you're increasing your certainty. It is a tool for self-awareness. You're thinking about your thinking. And so it becomes a very productive process for you. Now, living to 130 and beyond. That should be and beyond, not of beyond, sorry. One of the first exercises that they do when you become a strategic coach member is that you do a life extension exercise. And it goes something like this. It is, well, he did 156, but I'll tell you how the exercise goes. He asked the question, how old are you going to be when you die? Okay, or at what age are you going to die? And it really is interesting, because when I asked that question, I am sure you got at least a ballpark number in your mind. And it is based on your experience. It's based on the relatives, your family tree. It's based on watching your relatives age and how old was grandpa or great grandpa or grandma or great aunt or whoever it was when they passed away. And then it would be maybe the patients that you worked with and stuff like that, or other people that you knew that were older in your community and in your life. And when we talk about living to 130 or 156 or even more, which I'll show you in a minute, that there's other people out there that are saying more, that it starts to become a functional. You get people go, oh, I don't want to, why would you want to be that old? I don't want to live that long. And what they're responding to is their reality of watching people age. But the question and then becoming decrepit and losing function and falling and becoming senile or whatever it is that we just lose function, and it's nasty, and I wouldn't want to live that long. But if you took that piece out and said, what if you were about the same as you were today? What if 20 years from now you felt just like you feel now? And for me, I'm 65 years old. What if, and my initial number was, I don't know, 88 years old or something like that. What if at 80, 87 and 364 days, you felt like you do now? would you still want to push your chips in and say, I'm checking out? And it's like, well, no, I wouldn't. Well, of course. It's like, okay, how much longer would you think you could live if you were really good at whatever age you started with? Another decade? Another 2 decades? What? And so that's how this started. Now, for me, I will tell you what happened to me. I went to a class reunion when I was 58 years old. So that would have been 40th, right? Graduate from high school at 18. My 40th class reunion. And when you go to class reunions, I don't know if how your ages vary, but you go to a class reunion and you always notice it's like, how do these people get so old? Who are all these old people here? Oh my God, did they age? Did they age? Did they age? And of course, it's not us, right? And I many of my friends were talking about retiring, and I sat across the table from one guy, and he was talking about his heart attack and his stroke. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me, man. You had a heart attack and a stroke, and yeah, it's 5 years ago already, kind of thing. And so you were like 53 years old when this happened? Oh my gosh, what, and so we're not old enough for this was kind of was my theme. But what happened after that is that subconsciously that stuff was bothering me. Probably at least a third to almost up to half the people were talking about retiring at that point. And I noticed over the next several months that my thoughts were being invaded with a sense of scarcity of time. I was running out of time. I wasn't where I wanted to be in my practice. I felt like I was just getting started. I'm thinking, oh my God, if I die now, it's like I'm dying of failure. You know, so it was that I'm running out of time. And what was happening is it was invading my thoughts on a daily basis, almost to the point where I don't know if I would call it anxiety, but it was getting damn close, and I thought, what in the heck is going on? And Reagan had Dan Sullivan on a podcast, and I was searching on my cell phone, and I was coming home from my Fond du Lac office. And I remember it was around Halloween, and I am searching, and I find this podcast, and I listened to this podcast in my car on the way home. And he was interviewing Dan Sullivan. And in the conversation, Reagan said, Dan, you got an interesting idea of how long you want to live, what age you want to live to. And he said, you want to talk about that? And Dan says, yeah, at 156. And it's like, okay. So I listened to Dan, and Dan was born in, I think, 1944. And so, yes. And so his reason for choosing 156 is that puts him to 2100, and he'll have lived in 3 separate centuries, and he really thinks that would be cool. And then he goes on, and so he's written a book about this, and he talks about this, and everyone that goes through strategic coach goes through this life expansion exercise. And part of his life expansion idea is the purpose of that is if and my number now is 130, which is interesting because I'm 65. It's halftime, right? If you're going to live to 130 and you have control of your business and you're controlling you have freedom of time, you can work when you want to work. You're relevant because you're still doing stuff. You're still impacting, but you're doing what they call your unique ability. And so you're doing things that you love to do that energize you. If you have freedom of time, freedom of money, that you're making enough money that you're living the life that you want to live. If you have freedom of relationships, that you're working with the people that you want to work with, and you're refusing to work with people that you don't want to work with, ideal patient and non-ideal patient, that's where those ideas come from. And then the fourth thing is a freedom of purpose. You're working for the reasons that you want to work. It's what motivates you. So his question is basically, if you have all 4 of those freedoms and you're working during your time now for most, if not all of you, if you're working to obtain higher levels of freedom in each of those areas, once you get them, why would you stop doing what you've created? If you can get the freedom of time, freedom of relationship, freedom of money, and freedom of of purpose, why would you quit? So his goal is to talk entrepreneurs out of retirement. Just keep going. So that's the purpose for that. But for me, this was a mind game. And what happened is I noticed after I listened to Dan and his 156, that when you make this decision and you tell yourself that you're going to live way past 65, and I'm not going to retire at 65. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to retire until I can't do what I enjoy doing, and I don't envision that happening. So I'm going to work until I can't. So what that did was that anxiety was gone. And it was interesting because it was gone it was gone like the next day after I did this. And I thought, this is just a mind game, And so that was in my mind, and and I thought, well, we'll see if time passes. And I had a conversation with my mother, and she kind of laughed at me, and she said, "Yeah, we'll see how long that lasts." And so this is another thing, and it's not quite watch me, but almost. I would say at 7 years ago, and it hasn't come back. So that anxiety is no longer there. And when I bumped my level up at strategic coach, because at the base level, you never meet Dan Sullivan. You see a lot of videos and stuff like that. But at the 10 times level, which is a level I'm at now, you actually meet him. And one of the reasons I jumped ahead is he's doing 10 times this year, and then he's only going to do this other thing called Free Zone Frontier. And those are people who are changing industries, basically, that he's got up there. And that's where Reagan is, by the way. But anyway, when I met Dan, I told him this, and I said, Dan, it's interesting. I said, I know this is a mind game, but it has worked. And he looked at me and he leaned in and he said, Mike, it's all a mind game. And I'm like, wow. When you think about it, it's like the way you interpret reality, the way you interpret everything it is. And so going back to the previous slide of thinking about your thinking and your attitude and your confidence and all of those kinds of things, if you focus on all of those kinds of things, that would qualify as a mind game, right? So Dan wanted to do 156 because he thought it would be cool to live in 3 separate centuries. And he said, you know what? He said, if you would like to argue with me about that, that's fine, but I don't care. He said, and honestly, I don't care if that's accurate information or not. But he's going to say the same thing that I just said to you. I care about how it impacts me today. Okay, whether it's true. And I learned Tony Robbins a long, long time ago said beliefs are empowering beliefs are valuable. Disempowering beliefs are not valuable. They're the amount that they're in reality, in other words, how true they are, how real they are, how embedded in reality they are, is irrelevant. And again, Tony's kind of saying it's a mind game, right? So Dan wants to live to 156, and he said, you know what? The day after I die, I'm not going to care. So go ahead and argue with you want to, but it's not about living to 156. It's about the way that living to 156, the idea affects him today. And for me, it's the same thing. It pushes away that stuff. By the way, Dave Asprey, the founder of Bulletproof, made the USA Today. There's an article over my shoulder. You can actually see that right back there. You can't see what it says, but it is a USA Today article, and it says, a plan to live to 180. Now, Dave's interesting because, they say that 122 or 4, I think, is the oldest person that's ever been recorded alive. And there is a question whether that person actually assumed her mother's identity at some point. But that's the oldest documented. So Asprey basically says that, and he thinks with, if you don't know who that is, he is the ultimate biohacker. He spends hundreds of thousands of dollars on himself each year, and he's got actually a biohacking conference that he has, and he brings in these influencers from all over the world and these inventions and all these kinds of things, and it's hundreds of thousands of dollars, and people, I'm sure, give him deals because he's got a platform and he's got power, and it's like, hey, try my invention. And so he's got a biohacking lab, I think, and that's somewhere in California. I know he's got a coffee shop. He's the Bulletproof Coffee guy. He's got a coffee shop in Santa Monica. And I don't know what else he's done, but I do know that he stepped down from being the CEO. He's still involved, but he's not the CEO anymore. Anyway, that's Dave Asprey and that USA Today article. Peter Diamandis, if people know where he is, he says 700, and I'm like, holy crap, Peter. And his logic is, well, other mammals do it, sea turtles or whatever, I don't know. So and maybe turtles aren't mammals, so I don't know, but I skipped that part of biology. In any case, that's Peter's logic. And if anybody doesn't know who Peter is the guy that created Singularity University. He wrote a book called Abundance. He's got a conference, a big summit called Abundance 360. He did the X Prize, and the X Prize is, I don't know, at 50 million, I think. So you get a team together and solve a problem, and it's a competition to see who can come up with the best solutions. And whoever comes up with the best ideas to solve the problems wins the prize. And what Peter figured out is that he could get much more bang for his buck as far as energy into an idea if he made it a contest instead of trying to hire people. So that's Peter. Me was 130, and I've written articles about it. So part of this, when you commit to doing something, if you make it public, and so when you do things like say it on a webinar, and when you write articles, you're making it real, so and again, I'm kind of like Dan. The day after I die, if you want to come and kick dirt on my grave and say, told you, you weren't going to make that, go ahead. But to carry that around for all the years, because I don't plan on going real soon, to carry that around for all those years is probably a lot of negative energy that's not worth carrying. But same thing. It's the way that makes me feel today. All right. He says that his first 78 years were R&D, and he's 78 years old right now. And he had a halftime party last summer. And so he said, now I'm really going to start producing. Very interesting guy. The day after I die, I'm not going to care. And I said it already, you can disagree with me. The attitude, yeah. And so I've already said all this stuff, and I'm sorry I go through the slides when I've already said it. So the other thing is there's something called the gap and the gain. And I don't have that book handy, but it is a little book that Dan Sullivan wrote. And the idea of the gap is we have goals defining where we'd like to be, but they're like the horizon. And as you get closer and closer to goals, you'll never reach them. So we need to set goals to motivate ourselves, but we need to judge our progress by how far we've come. So if you envision yourself walking toward the horizon, what you've got to do when you evaluate your progress is turn around and look behind you. That's the gain. The gap is what's still in front of you. Focusing on the gap is negative thinking about your thinking, right? That is impacting your confidence. So back to that slide, it's impacting those things negatively. So you want to focus on the gain rather than the gap. And that's the idea of that app, to put positive things in. You're looking at gains for the day, and you're putting gains in your mind right before you go to sleep. So if you the dreams that you have will probably be more about how well you're doing instead of how big of a gap you still have. Okay. The gap is a place of scarcity, and the gain is a place of abundance. Okay. Peter Diamandis has written 2 books about abundance, I think, and then he just wrote one with Tony Robbins on life something. I think I put it in here. When you find yourself in the gap, focus on the gain. So when you think about your thinking, you will notice when your thinking has turned negative and you start to become self-critical, then that's not a productive place to be. Oh, I'm in the gap. Okay, that's interesting. Let's get into the gain. And so what Dan says is he's been working on this for 50, 40 years, something like that, 40, 50, perhaps. And he said, if you think that I don't go into the gap, you're wrong. I just realize I'm there a lot sooner than you do, and I get out of it. So gap in the gain, protecting yourself. Constantly learning and growing leads to bigger, better future. This is the investment in you. You need to constantly learn and grow. You need to constantly figure out what are the things that are holding you back. So, questions about any of that? I'll turn the chat box back on and see. Okay. I think the next slide is going to say break. If you guys have any questions, type them in there. And we're too early for a break, so we're going to move on to something else. All right, next. Every time I click on something, then we're skipping break questions. Entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is kind of interesting. Reagan called himself an entrepreneur long before I did. When people ask, what do you do? I'm an acupuncturist, right? And think about this. When people ask you what you do, I'm an acupuncturist. That's a standard answer. And I remember I was on an airplane, and I think I was going to Salt Lake City or to a Reagan event. I should say Go Wellness, so you guys know where to look this up if you want to. A Go Wellness event somewhere. And he asked me, guy was I think he was a surgeon. And he asked me what I did. And I said, I'm an entrepreneur in the healthcare space. And he's like, oh, really? What do you do? And, you know, and so that led to a conversation. And when I was done with the conversation and I got off the plane, I said, wow, I said I was an entrepreneur. And I didn't think about that. That answer came out of my mouth. And so you hear that in the introduction from Donna too, that I started calling myself that. And it is getting to the point where it fits, it feels good, right? So are you an entrepreneur? Most people find a sense of security in working for an employer and having a job. Wow, right? In today's world, we probably realize that that's a bit of a false sense of security, because in the previous generations, people went to work at the local factory. And where I live here, the paper industry is huge. And there's a river that runs right through Appleton. And the whole area really is almost 250,000 people. And there's 7 cities here, Appleton being sort of the biggest at about 70,000. But anyway, there were paper mills all up and down this the Fox River here. The biggest one that people are probably aware of is Kimberly-Clark Corporation. And you say, Kimberly-Clark, who is that? And it's like, that's Kleenex, that's Huggies, that's Kotex, that's, so they have many, many brands that involve paper. And then there's another paper mill in town here that does carbonless. That's their specialty. But all along, there were probably at one point 7 or 8 major paper mills along the river here. So people from this area work in the paper industry in the mills themselves, or they work in businesses that support the mills. Packaging is also really big here. But the point is that many people, and many of my patients, including a lot of the veterans, spent their lives working in paper mills, and they worked at the same mill for the 30, 35, 40 years, whatever it was that they worked. You see more and more things close, plants closing and stuff like that, and people just don't have the job security that they used to have. So it probably isn't really a sense of security. It's a false sense of security because people lose their jobs. Same employer for your whole life. My father worked for Boland's Corporation for 40 years, I think. He ended up on medical disability. He had colon cancer, which turned out to be terminal. When he was 64, it was diagnosed, and he passed at just a couple of months past 65. By the way, I hit that date in June of this year, and that was kind of a kind of an eerie, strange feeling of the next day I knew I'd been on the planet longer than my father made it, and that was the first sense. And the second sense was, oh my God, he was young. I didn't realize how young he was until I got to that age. And that was very young. But he worked for the same employer that Boland's in Port Washington, Wisconsin for all of his years. And he actually did the same job for all of those years too. And that doesn't really happen anymore. And we certainly were not well-to-do or rich by any means, but he made a living. Many of my patients, same paper mill for 40 years. My father, same company for 30 years. The first person who moves away from that security of having a job would call a rugged individualist. And it's like, you know what, I'm going to make it on my own. I know how to create for myself, create a job for myself. And when I was first out of college, I had learned to paint from my grandfather. He was a lieutenant colonel in the Army, and he retired at 50, and he was just 3 years old when, I mean, I was just 3 years old when he retired. And he took on handyman jobs. I grew up just off of Lake Michigan, about a mile in a small town, and there were a number of people. Well, there were cottages all along the beachfront, right? And it's wooded. You know, probably the half mile up to the beach was woods, and all these cottages were on the edge of the woods, facing the lakes. You know, the Lake Michigan, that type of thing, right? And these were all people from. You know, these were summer homes. These were people from Milwaukee, from Chicago, from you know, points further away. And then there were a few people from my town that had small cottages or cabins on the lake too. But anyway, a lot of these people were not local, and they were fairly well to do. And my grandfather would watch their houses for them, their cottages for them. He would there were private roads that led to these things, and they weren't very well maintained. And if there was a storm, you know, it would come through, trees would blow down, and my grandfather would cut them up. And actually what he did was he hired kids like me and then gave us the equipment. And I started working for him when I was 14, and I learned how to paint. And I was probably headed for a rugged individualist painter. Had I not probably gained 15 or 20 pounds by drinking beer every night after the 1 year I did that. The other thing that you find out later is that suicide rates are really high among painters, and alcoholism. And I think it's because you spend so much time alone. But I could have done that as a rugged individualist, but I shifted. I was a physical education major and trying to get a teaching job, and it just wasn't happening. And so I ended up going back to grad school instead. So I'm really glad that opportunity came up. But the rugged individuals thing is the guy or gal, woman that makes her own way, that creates that job for herself. To create, the next level would be to create a business that actually employs other people, you know. And so a number of you are probably at various stages of this. A lot of you are the rugged individualists right now, and you have to do everything for yourself. And hopefully that you get some of the ideas today from the last 2 days, that you need some additional who's, and the who's are, you know, who do I know that could do this? So I don't have to, because it's a waste of time for me to sit on the phone with the VA, right? It's a waste of time for me to answer phones and schedule appointments and track down people that didn't show up, and so on and so on. So when you create a business, you actually are employing other people, but your who's for rugged individualists, this phase between employing people and being the rugged individualist that does everything, may involve the use of technology. And some of that was coming up in the chat box yesterday, and some of it was things that I had mentioned too. But we can use technology as a who, and the idea of a who is to get stuff off of our plate. So you narrow it down initially to things that require an acupuncture license to do, and then you start narrowing it down further to the things that you are good at and enjoy doing, and then defining your unique ability eventually, and then continually on an ongoing basis circling in on your unique ability. And it may change, and that's okay. And you will define it more and more closely all the time. Okay, so creating a business that employs others is kind of that next phase. An entrepreneur actually collaborates to reorganize resources to greater productivity. So an entrepreneur can create new things, but usually it's a different perspective. You don't necessarily create a new product or service. but a new way to deliver it, or a new ways to combine services and such. Hang on just a second. Sorry about that. The throat was dry, then I took a drink, and then it tickled a different way. All right, so but entrepreneurs collaborate to reorganize resources. So thinking about your thinking, that's a mind shift or a mindset shift that you can have. As I mentioned yesterday, it's like, would you like to sell a program that included something like massage, or that included something like, I don't know, reflexology, if you knew a reflexologist? Or and I said yesterday, what if you went to the massage therapist and said, hey, look, I want to do a program that has massage in it, and I'd like to farm that massage out to you. And so here's what I want to do, and here's how I would do it. So I would buy the block of massages from you, and I would charge the patient, so that you remove the obstacle of the patient having to go to the massage therapist, pay the massage therapist, come back, you pay you, whatever. It's like, no, it's a one-stop shop. It's one payment, one deal, it's done. And you make it easy from there on out. So that's reorganizing the resources to be more productive. And a thought just came into my head with this too. This is an interesting, excuse me, phenomena. But when you do a program that includes herbs and supplements, if you just try to sell herbs and supplements separately as a transactional thing, since we did transformational versus transactional, you remember that yesterday? If you just if you just do that as a transaction, the price of the herbs becomes an obstacle. It's interesting. And that's not the interesting part, but you guys realize that, right? You give them herbs and that's okay. Well, how do I take these? And then it's like, and how much are these? And then, oh, I don't know. And then they start going back to the shelf, right? When you put them in a program, if you tell the person, look, I'm going to give you $400 worth of herbs, and I'm going to charge you $350 for them, or whatever, right? When you give them the herbs and you give them the expensive herbs, they're pleased. They look at it and go, ooh, I got the expensive ones, good. And it's sort of like, you paid for them. You're just not having to reach in your pocket and take the money out now. So it's like, there's no pain in the payment now, even though my Pam, my bookkeeping person, is subtracting those herbs off of your herb bank, right? It's a very interesting phenomena, that the human psyche of how we look at those things. And that isn't a one-time observation. That's repeatedly across a whole bunch of different people. When you do a program and have them prepay, they're pleased to get the high-end services. Okay. More of, are you an entrepreneur? An entrepreneur reorganizes resources to make them more productive and makes a profit doing it. Makes a profit doing it, gives them, I don't know what that means. Oh, them, access to more resources. Okay. Part of my M was covered up and it read like N, sorry. So here's the part of this that you have to realize. It's like, we all have issues with money and fairness and all those kinds of things, and not overcharging and, you know, all that stuff, right? When you reorganize resources, you make a profit, and making the profit gives you access to more resources. So when people go like, Jeff Bezos, oh, Jeff Bezos, blah, 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 blah. Why does Jeff Bezos have control of the resources he has? Because he had fewer resources before, and he parlayed that into more resources and more resources and more resources. And people say money, it's like, money is just a resource. That's all it is. He has very, very, very effectively managed his resources to parlay them into bigger and bigger and bigger things. And it's like, who'd have thunk Amazon, all these blue trucks driving around in your neighborhood? It's like, when I first saw that, I'm like, this is real, huh? I knew, you know, Amazon had been online for a while, but it was when the blue trucks showed up and were driving around my neighborhood, I'm like, holy crap, this is really real. But he took existing resources and rearrange them, you know? So love them or hate them, or anywhere in between, you got to give them credit for having the vision, for being the visionary to see, and the guts that he could rearrange resources and do great things with them. And it's the same with Richard Branson. You go on and on. Elon Musk. They tend to take huge risks and go all in because they believe in what they believe in. They believe in what they're doing. Are you an entrepreneur? One of the things that that we're encouraged to do is develop and refine our story, because honestly, people like stories, and they like to hear that they like to hear that you had struggles. They like to hear that Elon Musk slept on his friend's couch because he had made a bunch of money, and he took it all and parlayed it into his next thing. And it's like, you didn't keep enough to have like an apartment. It's like, oh, I think I forgot about that. And which, if you check his story out, apparently that's legit that he did that. So you like to hear these stories of the rags to riches. You know, the Tony Robbins, that he was washing his dishes in his bathtub. And Tony Robbins is huge on feeding people. So he wrote a book called, it's right up on the shelf here. It's Money, Mastering the Game. And all the proceeds from that book are going to a foundation that he's created to feed people. Why? Because when he was a kid, they didn't have enough food. He went without food at times, and somebody delivered a Thanksgiving dinner to them that, you know, somebody anonymously did that, and he never forgot it. And he said, when I grow up, I'm going to feed people that, you know, too. So, but now you're talking about a guy in Tony Robbins who owns a private island. It's a big, beautiful resort. And his private jet that says Robbins on the side of it, and all that kind of stuff. It's like, when I was at Strategic Coach the last time, guy that sat across the table from me told me that he's been spending a lot of time with him. And he said that during the first 6 months of COVID, because Robbins had so many things scheduled, he lost $500 million. And he said he was kind of freaking about it, but you know, necessity is the mother of invention, right? And so what happened is he did this. So he figured out how he could go remote Zoom kind of stuff with a lot of his stuff. And apparently now he's making more money and working less hard than and he's a very hardworking guy if he ever did any of the stuff than he ever did. So again, it really is all about, you know, managing the resources. But I mentioned him because he was poor, got really rich, lost it all, got poor again, and got rich again. And now he's maintained it this time. But Tony is, I think, 2 years younger than I am. And so throughout my life, I had become aware of who he was when I was around 30 years old. And I actually did a fire walk in Chicago. And that's 20 or 30 feet on a bed of hot coals with, you know, barefoot. Very interesting kind of stuff. So, and seeing him in person is something. But the point is that it's the story. We all have a story. We all got to where we are through some trials and tribulations, some failures, whatever. And people like to hear those stories because we pull for the underdog, you know. We pull for, you know, the underdog. We pull for people to overcome adversity, right? I'm not a huge MMA fan, and I think it's really overly violent. But every once in a while, I'll get drawn in. But who am I, you know, cheering for or pulling for? It really is that underdog, you know. It's like, that guy's really cocky. I don't like that. I mean, I hope this guy beats him. You know, I hope he knocks him out. You know, that kind of thing. So we end up doing that. So understand that that's the way people think, that you need to develop your story. My thing isn't working. Okay. And why? Because when it sucks, you need to fall back on your why and remember remember why you chose the path that you chose, right? And guess what? It's going to suck. There are days when it's going to suck. And I'll tell you some about my it sucks times. And I told you yesterday that I called David Singer when I had one of my panicked it sucks times. And I'll tell you what that was in a few minutes. One of those, what am I going to do? And I want to jump back to developing and refining your story. And I'll do this and we'll take a break when I'm done with this. But I was at an event and there was a guy from a company called Campfire Effects. And a lot of times in the entrepreneurial world, we're not necessarily noticed. When I'm at these meetings and stuff, I don't think I stand out. Okay. I will tend to blend in, other than Reagan says, I have a seat in the front row. It's actually to his left. On the end in the front row, because I always have my backpack and I need room to put it. But this guy, I forget what his name was, but he's up in front and he turns and looks at me and he said, "Why are you an acupuncturist?" And I don't know why at that moment, because it might have been because I knew a lot of the people in the room, but I felt safe. And I said, because I got fired from my job. And there's sort of giggles. And it's sort of putting that in a nutshell. It's like, yeah, I did corporate America and failed. All right. Or to really say I did corporate America and that wasn't me. And it wasn't big corporation, but it's still that it was a hospital system with 2,000-3,000 employees, so 3 hospitals, that type of thing. And then he was like, "Are you willing to talk about this?" And he said, "Because I'd like to use you as an example. Are you willing to talk about it?" And I said, "Sure, fine." And so, like I explained with your patients yesterday, get down to the raw emotions of that experience. And he pulled this stuff out of me and the negative feelings and all of those kinds of things, and got into the gory details of the politics of what had happened to me and stuff like that. And so why are who you are and whatever, part of it is it sucks when people don't believe in you. It sucks when people think that you're a loser. And it's like, and I said yesterday when my friend got fired, it's like I reached out to him because I knew exactly how he felt. And he laughed and he said to me, he said, "I know I'm a loser. I'm gonna lose my house. I'm gonna lose he said, "That's where you go at night when you're trying to go to sleep." And I said, "Yeah, I know, I did that too." And so it's human nature to do that, of you just play this. And when you're lacking information, you make stuff up. And going back to that screen about protecting your attitude, watching your attitude, when someone pulls the rug out from under you and you lost your job, it's like, okay, what tapes are you going to play? You're going to play the tapes of, "I really suck. I'm a total failure. No, nobody wants me. I'll never find a job again. I'm going to end up having to declare bankruptcy." And you do all of that stuff, right? And so that's what human beings do. And then so then tell me about your practice. And I went into the practice and I did this and I did that and I did that and I did that. And then he says, "That's your story." I'm like, "Really?" And he's like, "Absolutely. You need to refine this a bit, but that's your story." The best stories have the most trials and tribulations and stuff that people have to overcome. People love that stuff. So when I talk to my patients, and I know, I look at them and it's sort of like, damn, it's like that diamond in the rough kind of thing. It's like, you get the "I'm worthless" exuding out of them. And it's like, I wish I could have you look through my eyes, because that's not what I see. I see a person that is not really themselves right now. And I don't know why you're where you are, but I know this is not you. I mentioned an article that I wrote, and this is a collaborator, it's not a patient, but she captured the essence of my creation of Eastwind, and that Eastwind was a manifestation of me. And actually, I think that's what she named the article. And I asked her to write a book for me. And I said, I want you to interview me, and I want you to write the book. All right. And I said, would you be interested in that? She said, oh, absolutely. I said, all right. I started emailing her, and it was like, I got to define this process and figure this out. But she's going to be the author and write the book. She's going to do it by interviewing me. And I'll be damned if she didn't answer my emails over and over. And I'm like, what in the heck is going on? And then I had some interaction with her, and she was just profusely apologetic that she knew that it was rude, and it really wasn't her, and she wasn't sure why, and all that kind of stuff, whatever. I'm like, all right. And so then it was touch base, and all right, let's reestablish contact, and let's pick it up, and let's go now. And the same damn thing happened. And she had lost, well, the magazine that she had written an article in was a little local health and wellness advertising magazine. It wasn't advertising, little health and wellness magazine that a guy owned, that I had advertised and wrote articles for. And the guy that owned that, it turned out that he is definitely an entrepreneur, and he and I were kindred spirits, and we hit it off great. And I always said I wish all of my vendor relationships were like him. And he ended up, the relationship was, when his cash flow was bad, I'd buy a cover. And when my cash flow was bad, he'd say, pay me when you can. That kind of thing. And we would just, and I was like, I wish all were like this. And he's like, Mike, I know you're good for it. Just pay me when you can, kind of thing. And he was calling me and telling me he needed 10 minutes of my time. I just need 10 minutes of your time. And it's like, yeah, I know it. This is the salesman in you coming out. So, and then finally I said, look, I got a team meeting on Tuesday or Monday, and I'm going to end it 10 minutes early to be able to talk to you. But I got patients coming in at 1:30. So you got from 1:20 to 1:30. That's it. And he said, sold, I'll be there. And he came walking up to my door of the clinic, and we have windows, and I could see him coming up, and he walked through the door, and he was thinner than what, he was that relatively big guy he was insulin resistant, had a fairly, large gut. But I'm looking at him, I'm like, man, you've lost weight. As a matter of fact, you've lost so much weight that you don't look good. Are you okay? He goes, no, where can we talk? And I'm going, uh-oh. So we went to my office where I'm sitting right now, and he says to me, I got pancreatic cancer. I got 6 months to live. And I'm like, oh, man. So this was one of those things of, we both cried a little bit. And I said, I really, really enjoyed working with you. This really sucks. What do you do with this, right? So he didn't make it 6. He made it about 3. He was her boss. And it was right after that she had this behavior going that she just wasn't. And it was the same kind of thing. It's like, Grace, you're not yourself. I don't know why. And it's like, I'm not holding this against you. I have to move on, but I'm not holding this against you. I hope that you find your way through this, and that I see the Grace that I know at some point in the future, and kind of left it at that. I just wish you well. But so that didn't work, but there are times when it sucks. And your why is why you chose this path. So those stories make a huge difference. And I forget where I started there, but let's take a break right now. And Donna, are you going to come back on, or? I think you guys can start the breakdown, and we'll announce it. I think let's make it
we can do a 15.
Sounds good.
Okay, so let's return at 10:30, guys.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.
Hey, Michael, whenever you're ready, you can start.
Okay, great. Share my screen, right? All right, there we go. So Teresa had asked in the chat box if I had a motivational book to start with, a favorite motivational book. My favorite motivational book, when I was still in the corporate world, I cried my eyes out when I read it, was Jonathan Livingston Seagull, and